I think you probably made the biggest noticeable changes in your physique that I saw from when we met you to 2014, where you won a pro show and you won you fourth place at Worlds behind three now world champions.
They're crazy physiques, man.
Cleveland Thomas, Siobhan Cunningham, and Levi Burge. All three of them have won world championship titles in the most prestigious organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the only ones who beat you that year in the middleweights. So that was one of the most stacked middleweight classes we've ever seen in Worlds. You were right there in the top 5, and you did that in your mid-40s, even older than I am now. So for you, it was a very different process. What did that look like?
That process was, yeah, definitely different. So if you recall, like when I met you guys, it was predominantly just HIIT, like for 16 years. So low volume, high intensity, which now in hindsight, I think was very productive for me. I think the major changes we made in my approach was more on the nutritional front, like a big picture approach to that. Because in the past, I would over diet. I would just eat up tissue. So I was coming into shows 160 pounds shredded. That's how I got my pro card. But I had no business being 160 pounds shredded. I should have been 170 because we went from 2009 to 2011. I was 10 pounds heavier on stage. And if you recall, everybody's like, this guy's juicing. There's no way this 40-year-old put 10 pounds of muscle on in 2 years. It wasn't that I was like gaining muscle. I think I just learned how to retain muscle. So it totally changed my physique. And I would say, like, I think the biggest change, like, if we think training, as far as improving my physique, would have been my hamstrings were good back then, but like the glutes, just like the size of the glutes, the quads, like just overall size, I just wasn't doing any like good hinging patterns. And the ones I was doing, it wasn't very productive. So you combine quality of training with not that great of nutrition, losing too quickly. I just didn't have that development. So we started incorporating like hybrid deadlifts, proper RDLs, things of that nature, and just focusing on more performance, because back in the HIIT days, it wasn't really focusing on performance too much. Like, let me try to increase the loads or the reps. It was just more about failure.
Yeah.
At all costs. And I think I was just running myself into the ground. So I think the training just got a little more targeted on that. And also my back too. That's another you remember that day we were in the gym and I was doing bent over rows and you're like, Jeff, why don't you try rack rows? I don't even know what a rack row was back in 2009. So we started implementing that, and it just improved the overall quality of the back training, along with like learning more about cadence and things like that, controlling the loads. So I think those are the major things, and it just transformed like my whole posterior chain.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the biggest thing.
Mm.
Incorporating refeeds, that type of thing as well.
Taking creatine.
Yeah, that helped too.
Yeah.
I put it like, that was like 2 or 3 pounds on me after I started doing that. Yeah, but yeah, and then just the whole diet approach. I think that's the biggest thing. Like that muscle retainment was just so key.
Yeah. Yeah, there was that's a very different list, and there was no targeted
there was no
specialization cycle.
like, okay, we need to bring up your back, so let's do more. More is like I need to learn how to properly train back, because before it was like just bent over rows, and like pull downs were always heavy.
Yeah.
So it was like a lot of arms. So I just really didn't know how to train back properly. So for me, what worked was just cleaning up the execution, the form. And I responded to that. So I kind of noticed like, okay, I don't need to do more volume or more frequency. I just needed to correct my quality of training and be more specific with like exercises that were more catered to me at the time.
Yeah. And that is something that I think, you mentioned earlier, you were like, your performance is really good in terms of the quality of your work. And if that wasn't getting it done, then you probably need to do more if you're recovered. And I think that's a really key thing I don't want any of the intermediates entering the advanced stage to miss. If you're just looking back at my experience where I did lower volume, higher intensity, and you're like, oh, you lost size up top, you need more volume. I think what you're probably missing is that I really did refine my exercise execution under the tutelage of Jeff. And that's something that I think is far more valuable than most people recognize, because that is probably a really important first step, and it lays the groundwork for if you need more volume, you want to make sure that your exercise execution is pristine first, or otherwise you're throwing slop on it, and you're probably at best it's far less efficient than it could be. You think you need 20 sets, but you could actually get it done with 15
Yeah.
of higher quality. Or at worst, you're doing a higher volume of something that might actually aggravate some things, cause injury, or just have this level of fatigue that you can't properly recover from, and you can't get to the quality volume you need to see that progress. So while volume was the answer for me, and frequency and training closer to failure, um,
But it wasn't sloppy training, though.
no,
You had your quality you needed proof first.
yes, and I'm very happy to say that my exercise execution and technique has improved over time. If you find old videos of me powerlifting, you can see my knees knocking. I'm doing
That's what I was
lower
gonna say. Like,
squats.
if you go back, even me, like, if you go back to that 2009, 2010 era where we were kind of just getting to know each other, we look back at all those form videos, even Alberto's, like some of those, I'm like, what were we doing?
Yes,
Like, it's totally just improved over the years.
yeah. I feel I'm not on the Godfather level yet, but I feel like I am objectively a very good performer in terms of
Your reps are all standard though.
yeah,
Like we could talk about style, right? Like I have a style, you have a style, but I think both of us are really good at like making sure that everything is very consistent with our reps. I
that
think that's
yeah,
more important than like making sure like everything's just super pristine from A to B.
yes,
Because there's gonna be people out there gonna be like, "Well, come on, man. You can
could improve.
look at Ronnie Coleman. You know, he's look how jacked he was, and then you can look at his form and go, oh, it wasn't all that great."
Yeah, but it was consistent.
Exactly.
Ronnie did
Yeah.
make each one of his grunty reps look the same.
Like if I did Ronnie Coleman's form, I'd probably injure myself.
Yeah,
And if he did my form, he wouldn't progress like Ronnie Coleman.
he at least wouldn't enjoy it. I can tell you that much.
There you go.
Having met the man and watched him train,
And
he likes to sling weights around.
and
Yeah,
you're training 19 years now. I'm 37, so obviously we like what we're doing.
yeah,
Like if we didn't like it, then we wouldn't keep doing it.
yep.
So I think it's important that we do have like kind of like our personalities. Like I
Mm,
think sometimes we watch people train, their personalities come out through they're
yeah,
expressing it through the way they move.
yeah. And let's face it, bodybuilding is not just a sport; it's also an art, and that means you just have to marry up those two concepts. So if my technique was actually holding me back, I'd modify it, and then
Like my Rose.
exactly.
Yep.
And I'd modify it, and then my expression would come into it. But I think a lot of people, and I'm not critiquing them for this, they work through things emotionally. They let their personality maybe play too dominant of a role to
Mhm.
the point where if they're competing or if they really do want to see progress, um, it's holding them back. So that's why it's really good to have coaches, to have colleagues, to have people in your corner. And I feel very grateful for that. So anyway, I guess my point is that you need a foundation of quality training in terms of execution before you start exploring a higher volume approach or even a higher intensity approach.
Mhm.
So that's something that I think we both had, and you have experimented with higher volume, and it was not the solution for you.
It was counterproductive. It was kind of opposite of what you got out of it. So I ended up just getting more fatigued and more beat up. And a couple months of that, I was like, okay, I need to kind of revert back to where I was because obviously this is actually leading me down a bad place because I didn't want to be beat up. So I kind of learned and the way I would do it was like kind of like the traditional, let's ramp up the set volume, each week and then we'll deload. So I did that. I gave that a good shot and I didn't see any like physical improvements. Like I didn't see any added size or anything that. But I'll say this though, like, because before I ran HIT, I was more of like that 6 day a week guy and that my volume was a lot higher and I didn't really see a lot of progress from it. And when I did HIT, I started seeing a lot of progress. So right away I was like, okay, this is what I should be doing all the time.
Mm,
But the thing with that is when I went to HIT, I started eating a lot more food.
mm,
So I had, the supply and demand was basically like the supply was outpacing the demand. Now the question is, what if I would have eaten a lot more when I was doing 6 days a week when I was, those were my younger days? Would I have seen just as much progress? I don't know. It's quite possible though, because
Well, I think but you tried it twice, basically. You had that lower volume initial dogmatic approach to HIT that worked better while you were eating, And then when you met us, you did increase your volume. You tried a 2-day upper lower split, basically doubled your volume with us for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And you were eating. That was in the off season,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't really pay off.
I think the off season, yeah, was just similar. It looked similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say in both of our cases, there's been multiple experiments of trying the other way. And honestly, my legs understand what your experience has been
Mm-hmm.
because I've gone on high volume powerlifting programs. I did Olympic weightlifting while I was powerlifting. I took the same approach for my lower body that I was with my upper body for many years from bodybuilding, like 2 days a week lower body with all those, probably, 9 sets per exercise. Sorry, 9 sets per muscle group per each one of those sessions. And the difference was my SI joint felt worse with higher volume, but nothing else.
Yep.
And I could progress my lifts, the look of my muscles, and my just general, like all the indicators I have of whether I was getting a good stimulus were the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I just never got anything more out of higher volume lower body training. And then I had another experiment with it where I got hip surgery. And when I got back into just doing like singles and a little bit here and front squats and really trying to train around a double labral tear that got repaired and, shaving off my FAI, I was shocked at how little it took for me to get back to my prior strength levels and what my legs looked like afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't atrophy. There was no shrinking. I was doing some other work that I could do on the side, but my lower body is essentially hit responsive.
Right.
And honestly, not even the failure. I just don't need that much, right? And I'm sure I could do a little bit more and actively make them progress. But the threshold for my lower body is way lower.
Mm-hmm.
And my lower body joints don't like doing, nobody's do, right? But you try to make me do what Tom Platz does, and I'd be injured within a week.
Yeah.
Most people would. But the point being is, this is going to be body part dependent. It's going to be individual dependent, and it's going to change for you over the course of your career. But there's a lot more that goes into it. For example, what you retain, we both noticed made a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And also the ability to present it. So in competitive bodybuilding, in the end, the only thing that matters is what do you look like on stage. And I think we just can't hyper focus on any one of these factors to the point where we think that is what's going to make the difference. You can put on 10 pounds on your stage weight, but if your posing is pretty crap, it's going to seem like way less than that.
Yeah.
And you will get beat by people who are objectively worse physiques, but better bodybuilders than you.
I've beaten much bigger men. I've seen lightweights beat heavyweights at the Mayhem.
Yep.
Because heavyweight did not know how to pose at all. And that lightweight probably would end up losing if that heavyweight knew how to pose.
Shout out Marvin.
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
Yeah, he looked great that day.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.